Stephanie, thank you for sharing your beautiful voice with us. You really sent chills up and down my spine. We needed that. We need that right now. Thank you. I will talk to you soon. My thanks. Okay.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. All right. We're also now going to do the Pledge of Allegiance. So. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. I understand there might be a problem with the audio on HCTV. Do we want to check on that, Jarida, before we go on?
Yes. Hi, Jennifer. Oh, she said you're back on.
Thank you. Does that mean that we did not, that's Stephanie? Well, I hope that we can replace Stephanie. All right. So I want to again thank Stephanie for sharing her beautiful voice with us. If that was not heard on public access, maybe we can somehow replay it from the computer. Because in-person meetings, I can't, because in-person attendance at public meetings is likely to increase the risk of transmission of COVID-19, this meeting is being conducted in accordance with Governor Lamont's Executive Order 7B. I can't turn off my chime right now, I'm sorry. 7B and Section 42 of our standing rules, which permit virtual public meetings, I apologize. Members of the Town Council and some town staff are participating by WebEx. Members of the public can view the meeting live on West Hartford Community Television or West Hartford Community Interactive Comcast Channel 5 and Frontier TV Channel 6098 or www.whctv.org. The meeting is also being recorded for on-demand viewing, which will be available on the town website. Because of the virtual format, there are some special rules and procedures that I need to cover before we begin. First, I ask all participants to please mute your devices when you are not speaking. If a counselor wishes to be recognized, please raise your hand and I will call on you in the order I see the hands go up. If you are participating via audio only or I do not call on you and the debate is ending, then please unmute your phone and let me know so that I can recognize you. And I don't have everybody on the full screen, so please let me know. You can text me on my phone. And I will try to turn the chime off when I'm not speaking. Second, main motions will be made by me and no second is necessary. We will proceed immediately to debate. Those motions include motions to adopt, to receive, or approve business items. Subsidiary motions will require a second. These include motions to amend. A member must be recognized before making a subsidiary motion, but any member can second a motion by just unmuting their line and saying second. Third, pursuant to the Executive Order 7B, all speakers must state their name and title each time they speak. When addressing other counselors or members of the staff, speakers should do so through the chair. Simply preface your question or comment with "through the chair." And when you are done, I will recognize the person who is most appropriate to respond. Although these practices might seem a little awkward, they will ensure the meeting is conducted in an orderly fashion and that members of the public who are listening can understand the debate. Fourth, because of the difficulty in tallying voice votes on a video conference, it is required that all votes be taken by a roll call. However, certain procedural motions, such as a motion to recess or a motion to adjourn at the end of the business meeting, that will be acted on without objection by the motion as made by the chair. Finally, a reminder that if any participant has a problem with their connection, please call Jerida Reinheimer, whose phone number you were provided with earlier. She will let you know, and we will recess the meeting while the problem is being resolved. If it can't be resolved quickly, we will ask you to call into the meeting using a telephone or a phone number and participate via audio only. Madam Clerk, please call the roll and note the staff members who are present.
Ms. Blanks.
Here.
Ms. Cantor.
Here, Mayor
Mr.
Cantor.
Davidoff.
Here.
Ms. Fay.
Here.
Mr. Gold.
Here.
Ms. Kerrigan. Ms. Kerrigan. Mr. Sweeney.
Here.
Mr. Winograd.
Here.
Mr. Williams.
Present.
And we also have Town Manager Matt Hart. Fire Chief
Matt Hart,
Priest.
present.
Sorry, Fire Chief Greg Priest.
Chief Priest is present.
Finance Director Peter Privatera.
Jim Privatera is here.
Corporation Counsel Dallas Dodge.
Dallas Dodge is here.
Deputy Corp Counsel Gina Verano.
Gina Verano is here.
Town Planner Todd Dumay.
Todd Dumay is here.
And Town Plan and Zoning Chair Kevin Ahern.
Kevin Ahern is here.
Thank you, Ms. Labrot. Sorry about this. I really cannot. Well, I apologize. I'll mute as soon as I can. We will now, I move to approve the minutes of April 6th, 2020. All those, and if there are no oppositions, we will approve the minutes. Is there anybody that is opposed? The minutes are approved. Number 3, we don't have any consent items on our agenda. And number 4 is report from the town manager, Mr. Hart. I will shoot it to you.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining tonight's meeting. I would also like to extend my thanks to Stephanie for her excellent job this evening singing the national anthem, and I've also had an opportunity to hear her previously, and just a great example of West Hartford's finest, our students that just bring so much talent. Fire Chief Priest is also here tonight and will add to my report. He'll provide a report on the incident command system. I did upload my manager's report earlier today. You can follow along with me if you'd like. First, most of the report, pretty much all of it, focuses on our response, our continued response to the COVID-19 crisis. And today, our regional health district has reported a total of 174 positive cases in West Hartford, unfortunately, with 20 deaths. Moving on to the next item, and I sent the council an email on this earlier today as well. I have decided to retain some additional assistance on the communication side, particularly to assist us with communicating with and supporting our business and nonprofit community. And the firm I brought on, they're a very small firm. The name is Intersect Public Solutions. Brian Durand is one of the principals of the firm. He is a West Hartford resident, and he'll be working with us most closely. And they do have some very good experience managing government communications in times of crisis. And they'll be able to work with and augment the communications team that we have formed. And that team consists of our public relations specialist, as well as some of our library staff. Intersect, they'll also help us to make sure to help us ensure a phased and smooth transition to normal operations when we're able to do that. The contract with them is very short. It runs for 90 days at a cost of $4,500 a month, $13,500 in total. And again, I think they'll be a great addition to working with the staff communications team, in particular with helping us to support our business, nonprofit, and cultural community. Moving on to our biweekly COVID-19 report. I've attached the larger report that's prepared by our directors, and you can read it at your leisure. I do have several key excerpts that I wanted to touch on. Over the past week, our fire department has responded to 204 incidents, of which 140 were medical calls. Responses to expected COVID patients continue to rise, and Chief Priest will elaborate on my comments when I complete this section of the report. Secondly, the state has rescheduled its presidential primary from June 2nd to August 11th. The town clerk, Corporation Counsel, many of us are registrars. We think that this is really good news, and hopefully it will be much easier to manage a couple months from now. Moving on, our economic development specialist, Kristen Gorski, she's working remotely, staying current with all the state and federal programs that support our small businesses. Some of the things she's doing, she's updating the webpage, pushing out e-blasts, working with the town's communication team. She's expanded her, she's doubled actually her regular email distribution list. She's communicating with 900 businesses right now, and have provided support to approximately 50 small businesses over the last week or two. In addition, she's partnered with the Chamber's Eat Local, Win Local campaign that the mayor will be talking about more when we move to the announcement section of tonight's meeting. And Mr. Durand from Intersect Public Solutions, who I just talked about, has been assisting Ms. Gorski over the past week. Moving on, our human resources department continues to monitor every employee who's out on leave due to the pandemic. To date, we have had 54 employees use some form of emergency leave, up from 33 at the last update. So this includes employees who might have been exposed either at the workplace, like a public safety employee, as well as employees who might have been exposed or potentially exposed in their own personal lives, like perhaps a family member, for example, and they're self-quarantining at home. So we've had 54 of those folks to date. We've also issued a safe workplace policy to address the mandatory use of face coverings and masks while at work. Our Community Life Safety and Support Program, CLASP, continues to provide a great service to our residents with special needs. The team is supporting approximately 240 people with requests for emotional support, for food, for medication, and other services. That team is made up of a couple of fire department personnel, 5 social workers, and 5 additional town staff. The food pantry, food distribution now includes toiletry items and snack bags. During the week of April 6th, we distributed 100 food bags. And then the week of April 13th, we distributed 83 food bags and 86 of those toiletry bags that I talked about. The pantry continues to operate 3 days a week, and we are increasing our volunteer capacity for food distribution and sorting. Our library, as you know, is providing some great assistance to the larger town government in terms of fielding questions from the public. Over the last couple of weeks, they answered 270 questions. They've handled 825 since March 16th. That's a wonderful service they're providing. On that theme, our communications team has really been doing an excellent job to expand on our social media and communications outreach. And you can see some of the highlights here, how we've had increased activity over Facebook, Twitter, Constant Contact, which is our email distribution list, our library newsletter, as well as the Everbridge system. So why don't I pause there, Mayor, if I could, and ask Chief Priest to provide an update on the incident command system, and then we can take questions.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. Chief Priest, you're on.
Well, thank you very much, Mayor, Manager Hart. This is Greg Priest, Fire Chief, trying to keep up with the rules of our virtual meetings. I'm teeing off of the manager's report to provide a little bit more background in our COVID response. And I'd like to start by saying we know that this is not business as usual. So running a virtual emergency operations center and an incident command system structured on the incident command system is challenging for everyone. So I appreciate the patience of my peer directors for their patience and their staff's patience, because sometimes swim lanes get crossed and missed, but ultimately we are running it in accordance with NIMS principles and providing assistance. So thanks to my peer directors. So I believe the ICS system is working fairly smoothly, right? We are definitely not out of this pandemic, but I believe that we do start to have a little bit of the groove going on. We're becoming more accustomed to working like this. So our emails are down a little bit, and a little bit less questioning on conference calls, and certainly some of the urgency of our planning efforts has tuned down a little bit, but we're still dealing with several aspects to the pandemic. So I'd like to point out kind of 7 major efforts, and Town Manager Hart has hit a few of them. So first would be we're working on our town employee safety and making sure that they have masks and protocols to ensure that they can do their work effectively while minimizing risk. We have our logistics section manned by John Phillips and his staff, and we're working on our PPE distribution as well. Other matters such as making sure that we have lodging for responders should they be quarantined. So I'm thankful for Bob McHugh and members of the health district as well. Town Manager Hart touched on the CLASP, or the Community Life Safety and Support Program. It's very beneficial outreach to our residents, and I'd like to see that expand to make sure that we have that available to as many people need it. We have now an eye towards organizing for our recovery and our financial reimbursement and our record keeping to make sure that we're able to secure that. And our finance and administration section, run by Rick Ledwith and closely assisted by members of Pete Privatera's finance staff, are working to ensure that we have those records and the financial reimbursement path in front of us. We continue to keep an eye on the trends of the virus, and as well as how the country is responding to this, whether or not that be watching increased community testing, increased first responder testing, and just general planning as we move forward. Obviously, we are in the heart of our response. We're still, I believe, in the acceleration phase or perhaps a plateau. So there's a lot that goes into responding, and we're doing a lot of calls, and there's a lot of associated activity to make sure that our responders are out there. And then lastly, also, as Town Manager Hart pointed out, we're working to make sure that we're keeping our community and our responders informed of what it is that we're doing. And that's coming in the form of both public outreach and reports that are being submitted to the manager for distribution to the council. So speaking operationally, our police department is still out there with us, much like the fire department. We cannot let down our respective guards for other types of calls that are occurring in town, and we rely on each other heavily for cooperation and information gathering. You know, our responders are stressed, but they're being patient with us. I think as of last count, we issued 28 new directives on how to protect, to maintain their safety and the things that we need to do in the face of the pandemic. We learned some early lessons. We no longer have any more personnel in the fire department quarantine, but we recognize that this will continue to happen in both our police and fire departments as the situation changes. As I discussed at the last council meeting, you know, a large change was our fire department redeployment, where we put 3 light duty ALS vehicles out there, and we increased our level of PPE over and above that of our CDC recommendation. So enhanced droplet protection. And a significant portion of that was our ability to do that was due to the generous donations of some of our residents. So as far as the deployment of those 3 units is concerned, you know, it was first thought of and executed in our planning administration section, and we benefited by the 2 staff who were brought in off the line to be able to assist. And now we're watching that this model of using specific COVID units and light duty and increased personal protective equipment now seems to be a fairly consistent mode of operations for other fire departments similarly postured to the West Hartford. So our deployment would have been impossible without some of the assistance from the loan of some police department vehicles, and with our fire department mechanic, Vince Avarista, who prioritized putting 2 new vehicles that were obtained under last year's CNRE funds into operation. So it's just it was a huge effort on behalf of Vince, and it's an acknowledgement of how critical he is to our operation. So far, our 3-car model is handling our call volume well. It keeps 3 people on all of our other apparatus, which keeps them in district more. And Chief O'Callahan and Captain Smith have been closely monitoring the effectiveness, specifically with regards to our statistics. And looking at a retrospective review, Our volume is not tremendously off for our EMS calls, but it's significantly higher for our COVID-like complaints, such as flu, fever, or respiratory distress. And also very notable, especially after the guidance to have additional PPE in our new units, we have a notable longer on-scene time, and it takes us longer to clear a call. And I think this is a good thing because, one, our personnel are slowing down, they're getting into the right personal protective equipment, and then also as the length of the call extends out there, they're also taking more time because they're decontaminating afterwards. And decontamination is certainly a group or a team effort that involves our school district, our plant, facility staff, and responders. Are using Hall High School to do that. So we appreciate their partnership and cooperation. So we continue to have a very active communication strategy, both internally and externally to our stakeholders. We hold daily calls with the EOC staff and the directors, and we also have a weekly briefing with our fire department responders. We have a daily call as well with an executive policy group for policy level decisions. And I probably speak to Chief Riddick daily, sometimes several times, even outside of those. So we have an encouraging trend is that our questions on conference calls are starting to drop down. I think that's because people are more comfortable and we're a little bit in the groove. As I alluded to in my last report, I'd like to just talk about a couple of my concerns to make sure that they're out there. The first is always going to be for our responder health and safety. I believe our PPE situation is stable at the moment. I appreciate the donations that have been out there. We continue to evaluate our concern over our fire risk, and I'm also happy with the efforts of our fire marshal staff who are going to be working on some fire safety messaging for our community. Cost as we move forward relative to COVID response will continue to be a priority for us to watch. We need to ensure that the protection of our citizen responders is paramount, but we believe that most equipment and overtime related to this will be 75% reimbursable, but we need to be cautious. We also have to be methodical and make sure that we have the documentation and mechanisms in place to recover those costs. And I'm expecting that in the near future, our finance and administration section, supported by Pete, will be getting more in depth on watching the costs of this. And we will probably be designating a recovery coordinator who will handle our recovery from this. So internally to the fire department, I'm still concerned about filling our vacancies. Our 4 new people who came from the academy are a blessing in these times, or additional staff, but they will need to go back to the academy. Ultimately, we still have our vacancies and we're going to try and fill them as soon as possible. So it's a little uncertain when we will be able to fill those, and I have a lot of respect for our responders who can't see when their reinforcements are coming. But I have a lot of faith in our HR team and Assistant Chief O'Callahan, who's resulted in some great hires. They've done our hiring process before. I have some faith and hope that they can do it again. So wrapping up, I'm continually appreciative of the labor management relationship. We're way off of the reservation for how major changes in the department usually take effect. And our union executive board has been 100% a partner in helping us to move forward. So I'll close it out with some words about the people who comprise our response system. I'm humbled to be part of a team of dispatchers, police, fire, and AMR, as well as our healthcare workers who receive our patients. For those unaware, last week was National Public Safety Telecommunicators Week. These folks, known colloquially to us as dispatchers, are a key in our response as they gather information that gets the right resources to our citizens and are frequently able to improve the safety of our responders by eliciting key facts. It's important that when we think about our COVID response that we keep our dispatchers right in the same group as our field responders. So when I speak about the stress of our responders and the working conditions in the context, I want you to think about the anxiety that some of us face when we're going into a grocery store. Even a 10 minutes trip in to buy groceries is stressful. But all these folks on the line and the dispatch are working in places where coworkers routinely encounter COVID patients. Not hypothetically, but actually encountering people. They rely on each other to be current with their PPE and not be complacent. They don't have the option to follow government recommendations and stay at home. Specifically, the fire department, our officers who have spent years learning to lead their crew right next to them are watching their crews walk out the door and hoping that their training kicks in. Our paramedics and their firefighter EMT partners, the backbone of our medical response, they're deployed now into 3 light duty units, doing what used to be the work of 5, and they're dealing with multiple COVID patients per shift. They're doing it in extra PP. It's hot, it's cumbersome, but they're still held to the same high standards. And they've also had the new guidance given to them, as I mentioned before, the 28 directives, and they're doing it alone in a scout type model where they go in to reduce the exposure to others. So despite these stressing conditions, our order back overtime is actually down. Our people are coming into work to do it as expected. So I'm proud of these men and women in both fire and police, and I'm humbled to be in their company. And that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Priest, and I want to thank you for your leadership and your support, but I want, your message was very, very clear, that the people that are responding to the calls and dispatch are really, truly the ones holding up us all up and protecting all of us daily, with such courage, bravery, teamwork, the partnership with the unions, the partnership with the other public safety, with Chief Riddick and all of the police officers as well, it shows, and we're also grateful for all that you do, and all of your staff does, and again, including dispatch in all of this it's critical. That's the point of triage, and so important to how everyone remains healthy and gets the care that they need. So thank you so much. Appreciate it. And back to Mr. Hart. Do you have anything further?
I do not, Mayor. Just happy to take any questions councilors may have.
Can you see me? This is Lee Gold.
I was on mute. Mr. Gold, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Lee Gold, for the record. Matt, I just had a question about Intersect. While they're being signed on for the 90 days as I'm looking at it, is there an intent to continue on with them, or is this kind of a one-time shot? Or are we effectively interviewing them for 90 days as on a temporary basis to see how they are going forward? Maybe you can elaborate a little bit on that.
I would be happy to. Matt Hart,
Let me practice what Corporation Counsel is telling me. Mr. Hart, would you like to answer Mr. Gold's question? Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Matt Hart, Town Manager. Right now, we've executed a 90-day contract with Intersect. I think I may have mistakenly said Intercept earlier. Intersect Public Solutions. And at this point, that's all I'm viewing it as. If we were to look to retain a communications firm on a longer term basis, I would want to go back out to bid. And we did look at a number of Hartford-based firms for this 90-day assignment. And this was one of the companies that stood out for us based on their experience. The price point is also very competitive. I understand it's difficult to think about spending money, even a relatively small sum, on a consulting firm right now, especially when we have a spending and hiring freeze in effect. But it's because we think that communication with and support to the business and nonprofit community is so important right now. They're going to continue to need our assistance, may need additional legislative relief, any number of things. But the short answer to your question, it's a 90-day agreement, and that's how long I view the assignment.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. Mr. Gold, anything further? No.
Gold? No, nothing further.
All right. And this Mayor Sherry Cantor, Mayor Sherry Cantor calling on Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Mayor. This is Christopher Williams going through the mayor. Mr. Town Manager, I just want to express my opposition to this Intersect Public Solutions consultant. I have to say, every family I talk to in West Hartford is having either a pay cut or furloughing. And I think that if there's $13,500 to save, we need to do just that. We have, as you know and you said, an incredible staff that has been out in the forefront communicating. Our mayor has been out there aggressively with messaging every week and really daily. And I think the town has done an excellent job in terms of communicating. But I think that one of the messages that's not great about this is that as we're entering this budget season, that we have a savings here that we're putting towards what will ultimately be an expense or a lost opportunity to save. And it concerns me. So I want to express that to you, particularly as we move towards a revised proposed budget dichotomy, because I think this is not the direction we should be headed in this budget year. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Anything from
Yeah, Beth Kerrigan,
Ms.
through you.
Ms. Kerrigan? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Canta. Beth Kerrigan, Town Council. I do want to echo the sentiments of Chris Williams. I too was sort of taken back by the need to bring in a marketing company. And I guess, Mr. Hart, I'm curious, what specifically are they going to bring to our town that our town staff isn't already doing? And I do want to take a moment to commend the mayor, the communication, Mayor Cantor, that you have been providing through this very difficult time has been so impressive, so thorough, so consistent. Everyone I speak to feels very good that they know what's going on. So that being said, you're referencing nonprofits and businesses specifically. Can you speak to what they will do for us that we can't do on our own?
Thank you, Ms. Kerrigan. Mr. Hart?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Matt Hart, Town Manager. I appreciate the questions and the concerns. Again, I understand it's difficult to think about spending money on a communications firm at this point in time. But looking at the emergency operation, I believe that it's warranted and that they will provide some very valuable assistance to us. Some more specific examples, again, focused on the business community. So Ms. Gorski, our economic development specialist, has been doing a fabulous job in terms of handling calls and supporting individual businesses. That takes most of her time. In order to be able to prepare good content to push out to the business community, that's one of the key roles that Intersect will play to augment Ms. Gorski's work. Our town staff, our communications team, I think they've been doing a very good job as well, focused more on the general population, our residents and citizens in particular. Also, I think as we move forward, looking at how we reopen, looking at financial relief that the business community will need, we're going to be, I think, approaching our state delegation and our federal representatives on a regular basis to advocate on behalf of our business community. And I think this firm, while they can't engage in lobbying for us, they can assist in that effort as well. So again, I think they will be a valuable resource. If over the next month or so, we don't think so, we're not pleased with the work, we can terminate the contract. But I did think it was an appropriate step at this point in time. And we have initiated a spending freeze. We have initiated a hiring freeze, and on all discretionary spending, things like this that we think are warranted, we will approve on what we consider to be an important and as needed basis.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. Any further comments? Okay, I don't
hold
see.
on. Hold on. Sorry about that.
Okay, go ahead.
Hi, this is Councilor Mary Fay. I sent you a text, Sherry, so maybe that's not the best way.
That's
right.
Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, Matt, at the risk of, I don't want to say beating this to death, but just on the cost measure, reinforcing some things. I think hiring a consultant at this point, as much as they could be value added, it's probably not critical or necessary for what we're going through. And I think it may come across as a bit tone deaf, given the various businesses and colleges, for that matter. Christopher Williams, your alma mater, has just cut compensation to the tune of 15% across the board. And we're seeing a lot of folks doing that. And I'm just hearing after, unfortunately, your report came right after Chief Priest, and with all the overtime, which is needed. I'm certainly not suggesting that we don't use it, but I just see that we're going to have some, I'll call them bad guys in our budget this year. And adding something like this in at a time when we're not sure where we're going to come out, let alone what we're projecting for next year, I just think might not be the most prudent move to make. So again, communications is extremely important, but I certainly feel at this point a bit overwhelmed with communications between all the press conferences and robocalls and things like that. And they're positive. They're very, very good, but I'm not so sure that it's warranted at this point. So I would reinforce what Mr. Williams and Ms. Kerrigan has already said. Thank you. And Mr. Gold, I suppose, too.
Thank you, Ms. Fay. Anything further? All right. We have a lot to talk about tonight, so I just do want to say that I'm a volunteer and I work really, really, really hard. And there is I'm working constantly. And to be honest, the communication component has been overwhelming. It is I regularly participate in U.S. Conference for Mayors calls and Bloomberg calls, and they are the most important thing is communicating with your, and we actually do need expertise in communication. We can talk about the right way to do that. But there's a strategy to communication, and we're all responding to so many things that I don't know. It's hard to, on the outside, to look in and see how truly, I don't want to use the word crazy, but how intensely things are moving and as quickly as they are. I do think that this is something that we probably in the long term will benefit getting through this, but a day at a time. And I do think it was the right decision. But again, this was Matt's decision. I support it. I think it is critically needed, but we will reassess as things go on. Again, if communication falls apart, this has been a really, really heavy lift for everybody here. Anyway. So we will go on to Corporation Counsel, Mr. Dodge.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I'll try and be brief. My office continues to be very engaged in the emergency operations process. One of our primary functions is to review the executive orders that are coming down from the governor and the various executive agencies. They come down almost nightly from the governor, and then the agencies are also updating their websites frequently, and myself and Deputy Corporation Counsel Verano review those, make sure that the appropriate departments who are affected by them receive them, and provide advice, typically on the morning call that we have with directors every day. We've also, as part of that, been very engaged in advising the health district. A lot of the governor's executive orders, the questions that businesses have about how to comply with them don't go to the governor's office. They actually end up coming into local offices. And so it ends up being the health district and our staff that ends up having to answer a lot of those questions. And so they've kind of become the front line in terms of just answering questions about these executive orders. And so we're providing a significant amount of support for that. We've also been putting a lot of work into helping develop the new budget process that you will debate later tonight. And I want to thank you, Madam Mayor, and also Councilor Gold and Councilor Davidoff for your contributions and feedback on coming up with that process. I think that all things considered, it is close to normal as it could possibly be. We will be having 2 public hearings if the resolution is adopted, and they will include both call-in and write-in options. It was important to give members of the public as much opportunity to be able to participate as possible. And again, in keeping with tradition, one of the hearings will be in the afternoon and the other will be in the evening. We're also still working to develop a public hearing and public meeting process for other boards and commissions. Deputy Corporation Counsel Verano and I are working on a set of best practices so that some of our other commissions can get up and running. This morning we had a meeting of the pension board, and I would say that from a procedural perspective, it was very, very successful, and I think was in full compliance with all of the governor's orders. We've also begun the process of reviewing various contracts and leases. You'll recall that at the last meeting of the town council, the town manager was given the authority to renegotiate or modify leases and contracts if necessary due to the emergency. And so that process of review has begun. The town manager, per your resolution, is obligated to inform you of any time that he exercises his power under that. And while we have not done so yet, I anticipate that that will likely happen soon. Deputy Corporation Counsel Verano is also very, very involved in developing a process for the tax deferment and low interest rate program. We want to make sure that we come up with a eligibility process that is easy for taxpayers to comply with. And a lot of that involves some very technical expertise with the way that we receive tax payments. Generally, we also have a number of, we're starting to see more and more routine matters that our office typically deals with outside of the emergency. I think that when things first started, directors were kind of holding off on bringing different legal problems to the forefront, but we're starting to see an uptick in work there. And I just want to finish by saying I continue to be so impressed by the professionalism of all of the town staff, in particular our public safety and health staff. And Madam Mayor, it is a privilege to continue serving as their attorney and yours. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Dodge. We couldn't be in better hands. I'm so grateful for all that you do. I can't emphasize enough what goes on behind the scenes 24/7 with the amount of information that's coming at us. It is overwhelming, and it's really hard to see what's going on, and it truly is a war room. And I appreciate your keeping a cool head, and even a sense of humor at times is also much appreciated. Okay, any questions for Corporation Counsel? I'm looking. Bueller. I'm looking. I don't see anything. Okay, thank you, Mr. Dodge. With that, we will go to 4C. This is from our Town Planning and Zoning Commission, the Plan of Conservation and Development that we do every 10 years. It's a little bit extended this year, and we are so privileged to have the commitment of a very, very smart, engaged, caring Town Planning and Zoning Commission led by a really wonderful man, Kevin Ahern, the chair, and he is here, I think, to kick us off with the POCD. Thank you, Mr. Ahern.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you, guys. So my name is Kevin Ahern. I really appreciate you guys hearing from us today. This is a very important partnership between the Town Council and the Town Planning and Zoning Commission. However, it's one that rarely involves face-to-face interaction. So I just want to, thank you for the honor to present to you guys today. I also want to thank you for being the guinea pigs in this new process, because I'm going to have to run one of these meetings one of these days. So I appreciate you guys paving the way for the rest of us. So just briefly, I want to introduce myself and do a very brief introduction to the plan, and then hand it over to our town planner, Todd Dumais. Most of you know me. There are a few of you who don't. I was planning on bridging that gap in person, but that was not to be. I'm an 18-year resident of the town. I've been a member of the Planning and Zoning Commission for a while now, and I've been chair off and on since 2013. So I'm here to present a brief overview of the plan, I'm going to just walk you quickly through the process from start to finish very quickly, and then just highlight a couple differences between the prior plan and the plan that has been forwarded over to you. So as you saw in my letter, the first official meeting of the committee to put together the Plan of Conservation and Development met in September 2018. However, we really started talking about it probably around spring 2018. The first meeting was actually me and Kevin Prestige at the Beachland Tavern, to kick it off that year. So we wanted to create a plan that gave the town direction, but had flexibility built into it. So one of the earliest decisions that we had to make was who was actually going to do the work for the plan. We could have delegated it to a subcommittee and just had them report to us, and we considered that, but we decided that the commission itself would take on the work of it. We have an excellent group. Kevin Prestige and John O'Donnell are veterans, both of the Planning and Zoning Commission, but as well as the Conservation and Environment Commission. Michelle Maresca is a former planner herself. Liz Gillette, I can't say enough about the work that Liz Gillette did on this plan of conservation and development, and the work that she does for the commission on a daily basis. It was like having a town historian in the room, but I mean, she came prepared, and she just put so much work into this. And finally, I wanted to give a shout out to our alternates, Gordon Binkhorst and Andrea Gomes. I don't think they quite realized what they were signing on for when they first started, and they absolutely just did us a solid. They were there constantly, and they really put in an amazing amount of work, which is also why I've recommended for them to move up to the full-time positions. So after we put that together, the next thing we needed to decide was whether we were going to do an update or a full rewrite. And initially we decided we'll do an update. We're very happy with the plan of conservation and development that exists, and we look at it all the time, every meeting. And so that's where we started. And it's been a very successful plan of conservation and development. Things like Blueback Square were relatively young at the time, but and then the New Park corridor ideas, most of them have been implemented in the time since the last plan of conservation and development. As we went along in the process, we realized, we actually want to do a rewrite because so much has been accomplished. This needs more than an update, and so there was more substantial use of the commissioner's time as we went along. It's also why it took a little bit longer than we expected. And I just want to give also a brief shout out to the planning office. They were amazing. I mean, Todd Dumay and his staff did the lion's share of the scut work on this, and I cannot thank them enough for the work. So briefly, we started our work in fall of 2018, and the first quarter, through the first quarter of 2019, it was all data gathering through community and stakeholders. There was a town council workshop that was involved in that, and we really appreciated the town council's input into that. Town council was also invited to all of the public meetings, and many of them attended, which we also really appreciated. The second quarter of 2019, we started drafting. It was a very slow start, and so right around the third quarter of 2019, we started to meet more often, and to the point where during the summer of 2019, we were meeting on a weekly basis to draft it, and it went substantially quicker at that time, and we had finished the lion's share of it by the fall. The fourth quarter and early 2020, we started with a town council informal review of what was largely a finished product in October. And again, we received feedback from the town council, which we greatly appreciated and implemented. Started putting finishing touches on it, and then we made our referrals. And finally, we had our own public hearing at the end of February, and then we continued it into March, and we then also received further input from the town council, which we also implemented. And finally, at our last, what turned out to be our last meeting, we made a referral to the town council in March. Briefly, the changes, the sort of high-level changes that one thing that you'll notice right off the bat is the look and feel of the document. The prior document, while substantively useful, we often thought, if you're somebody just cracking open this document, it's not the easiest thing to read. And so one of the things that we wanted to do was make it a much easier document to approach, a more approachable document. And there were a lot of things that we did. Not only just, it's a more aesthetically pleasing document, but we took a lot of stuff that was jammed into the initial document. We moved that to an appendix. And we wanted to improve what we call the information architecture, the way that the information was arranged, make it easier to read, easier to navigate. We also added what we called the guiding lenses. And so what we wanted was that in every section we wanted, and it's just like an optometrist, right? You just put the lenses in front of you. Every single section was read through those four guiding lenses: the sustainability, innovation, equity, and finally connectivity. All of the sections were considered through those lenses, and that's new. This year. And then we also added, some greater emphasis on things that we didn't feel had enough emphasis in the prior POCD, including innovation, TOD, very important, and renewables, to name a few. Finally, we added some new sections. In addition to the guiding lenses, we now have a facilities and infrastructure section, a neighborhoods and housing section, which was more of like a reboot of the housing section. And then we did a reboot of the historical, which we ended up calling cultural and historical. So we brought new content there. And finally, in the implementation summary at the end, you'll see we wanted to make it not only easier to navigate, but easier to keep track of what we've done and what we have yet to do. So with that finishes my presentation. I'll hand it over to Todd at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Ahern. And again, I want to thank your commitment to the process, your knowledge and expertise that you brought to it, and your passion for West Hartford. And we've talked so many times, and the commission is again, has all of its members are incredibly committed, and it's just been quite a lift, and we appreciate it. And the document is, I think, a much more friendly and also a visionary. And I appreciate the input that you've listened to us, and you've incorporated some of our priorities as well as your priorities, which I think are all of the town's priorities. So thank you for that. And with that, I will introduce our wonderful town planner, Mr. Todd Dume.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Ahern, for that excellent overview and summary of the POCD process. And again, thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council, for this opportunity to speak, your patience for this process, which Kevin indicated went longer than we all expected, and your participation. This evening, I'll try to keep my remarks brief and touch upon how the council's comments, feedback, and your priorities were incorporated into the plan. Based on the council's participation over those multiple plan engagement meetings, as Mr. Ahern discussed, there really was a clear direction from the council that the plan must address 5 important topics. These aren't ranked in any order of importance, but economic development, a green plan or sustainability, transit-oriented development, housing, and then a multimodal transportation system. This direction and these priorities were incorporated into the plan in a number of ways and often repeated across multiple thematic chapters. And I would like to provide you all with a few illustrative examples of how. Right off the bat, if we look at the economic development section, every section of the plan is guided by the lenses that Mr. Ahern just discussed, but also there's an overarching goal for each section. And the goal for the economic development section really directly reflected the council feedback and direction that we received, and it's around promoting growth and retention of existing businesses, development of new business opportunities to strengthen the community's tax base in an innovative manner. And that really was something we heard from the community, but that was really something we heard loud and clear from the council. To support this plan strategy and goal for economic development, several actions and strategies were crafted. Now, as Mr. Ahern touched upon, this plan is a little bit different than our last in that we try to target the strategies and actions to directly support those goals. Again, reflecting council feedback and direction with economic development, a couple of examples are review the town's land use development and building permit processes to continue to improve efficiency, encourage infill development on vacant and unutilized lots, encourage the expansion of co-working spaces in commercial districts, encourage mixed use and higher density development in proximity to existing and planned transit stations and existing commercial districts, to formulate a holistic economic development strategy, and to review the parking zoning ordinances to identify potential areas for targeted modification that modernize the town's approach to commercial parking. Again, those were all feedback that we heard over our multiple sessions with the council, both in written comment and communicated back to us in those meetings. There's some examples on the green plan or sustainability. This one really is guided by that guiding lens, the sustainability lens. And through that lens, and again, reflecting council-specific feedback and direction, several of the planned strategies and actions support an overall sustainable green initiatives, including prioritizing sustainable practices at all town facilities, including energy conservation, the use of renewable energy that provide for a greater adaptation and resiliency to a changing climate. Explore adopting a leadership in an energy and environmental design certification requirement for town facilities, construction and maintenance projects. To continue to invest in stormwater infrastructure improvements throughout town with emphasis on sustainable green infrastructure being prioritized, and encouraging the creation of a municipal climate action plan. Focusing again back to one of those priorities we heard from the council, the transit-oriented development. This plan is unique in that it really acknowledges the state's significant investment in the CT Fast Track service, along with its slightly lagging, but also stated investment or in planning around the CT rail station, where we should be fortunate enough to have one, and how that has changed the development environment, providing a transformative opportunity in the proximity of both of our stations. Accordingly, this important development typology is referenced and promoted across the various plan sections, with specific references in both economic development, housing, transportation, and the land use sections. Notable plan strategies and actions support reflective council feedback and direction, including consistent with the recommendations in the New Park Avenue Transit Area Complete Street Study, review the zoning ordinances and consider the creation of a new transit-oriented zoning district, and supporting mixed-use development within commercial areas and adjacent to transit facilities. And again, those are repeated throughout multiple plan sections across the plan. Housing was a very important priority we heard from the council and also the community. The housing goal, I think, says really what the feedback we heard from the council was, and that's to enhance and maintain West Hartford's existing neighborhoods and encourage diversity of housing types and costs to provide access and availability of housing options to current and future residents. To support this goal, several planned strategies and actions were identified, again, reflecting council feedback and priorities, including to conduct a townwide housing needs assessment, to review the multifamily zoning ordinances and identify potential areas for targeted modification and innovative opportunities that increase the availability of range of housing types and affordability levels, to review our single-family zoning ordinances and identify potential areas for targeted modification and innovative opportunities, such as accessory dwelling units that increase the range of housing types and affordability, and also to continue to support the efforts of nonprofit groups and for-profit developers to expand housing choice options in the community. The other priority we heard from the council was, having a multimodal transportation system. I think the goal of this plan section really captures that thought. It says to promote an integrated and balanced transportation system, including complete streets to improve traffic flow, enhance parking opportunities, promote public transportation and carpooling, enhance traffic calming efforts, pedestrian mobility and bicycle access, and meet the needs of the next generation of transportation technologies and infrastructure. And I know that this is something that several members of the council really pushed us on, is to be forward thinking and innovative, to look at that next wave of transportation technologies. With an eye towards that, I think this goal is supported by several plan strategies and actions identified in the plan based on your feedback and priorities, including review the parking zoning ordinances to target modifications that modernize the town's approach to parking, review zoning ordinances to address growing trends towards electrification, next generation technologies such as EV, rideshare, and driverless cars, and to continue to invest in and support infrastructure improvements that both expand and improve the quality and safety of the pedestrian and bicycle facilities throughout town. So I hope that provided an overview and gave you some illustrative examples of how the council's priorities, feedback, and direction were directly incorporated into the plan. And again, I'd like to thank the council for their time and patience during this process. And I would personally like to thank the members of the Town Planning and Zoning Commission, their selfless commitment of personal time, without which the plan would not have been possible. So thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Dumais. And again, I appreciate all of your hard work and commitment to this. And you know, you were already so deep into the project. Sometimes when we would give you feedback, and to pause and take that to heart was really important, I think, to all of us. I would like to open it up to questions. Anybody on the council that has any comments or questions? I'm looking. Sorry, it's not the most graceful way to do this, but I see no hands. No? Okay. I see no texts.
It looks like Carol blanks.
Oh, okay, Carol, sorry. Carol, go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So through you, Madam Mayor, Councilor Blanks. So this question is for you, Mr. Dumais, or Mr. Hearn. So as I was reading through the report, thank you for the report, by the way, very comprehensive. Gave a lot of background and a lot of history. So my question in particular is around the New Park Avenue corridor development. In particular, it's my neighborhood, so a number of my neighbors, family, friends are very anxious to know how is this parcel going to be developed in the near future. I also noticed that you had residents, community residents involved in your commission or contributed to some of the planning. So I'm curious to hear the type of input that they offered as we move forward into developing this particular part of town.
Thank you, Ms. Blanks. Mr. Dumais?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, through you to Councilmember Blanks. We conducted a fairly robust community engagement process that in total had both in-person meetings, an online participation platform, and then several breakout or stakeholder engagement sections, including some of the neighborhood and business associations that encompass portions of New Park Avenue. And from that process, we incorporated their concerns directly into some of the suggested goals, strategies, and actions here. There was some limited concern, as there were in all of our different districts in town, and those are really highlighted in the community's perspective on each section, and those are found on pages 43. Going forward, I think your larger question is, I don't know how that development of that corridor in particular will play out. I think this plan points to a very prescribed and open engagement process that the council could consider taking. And I know the council is interested in looking at that corridor in particular and doing that in a engaged process with the citizens and the business owners in that neighborhood. But clearly with an eye on leveraging the state's significant investment in and around transit-oriented development, which includes additional housing, higher density, and mixed uses within that corridor. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Mr. Dumais. Ms. Blanks, do you have anything further?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Dumais.
Okay. Thank you. Any further comments, questions for Mr. Dumais? And remember, we are receiving this. So actually, Mr. Dodge, will we be doing a roll call vote to receive?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I would recommend a roll call vote for the motion to receive. And I'm not sure, has that motion been made yet?
No, it has not.
Okay,
so I just want to
I think I did see a few other hands up. I think Mr. Davidoff.
Thank you. Mr. Davidoff. Mr. Davidoff, you're up. I don't hear you. Maybe your mic is on mute.
Councilman Davidoff. Can you hear me now, Madam Mayor?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Perhaps Attorney Dodge could enlighten the council with respect to what receiving the plan of conservation and development means and what the process is going forward with respect to the legality of doing so, as to whether or not there's public input, public comment on this document, and how that is going to be handled going forward. And that's one thing. And the other thing would be to the planner and to the commission, Town Planning and Zoning Commission, which has a special place in my heart. They work quite diligently, understand our zoning code upside down, backwards, sideways, every which way, and sit on many applications where this plan of conservation and development is used by applicants to persuade or dissuade the approval of an application that may come before us in the next decade. So kudos to all those members and to town staff for taking the necessary steps to put us in a better position to be more current and hopefully be proactive and try to anticipate the needs of our community. The question I have to Chairman Ahern or the town planner is, are there areas in this report that were not absorbed into the document, that there were minority positions out there that were not part of what is being presented here this evening? It's fine if there aren't, but if there are, I would like to know, just for the record, what those would be. And that's it, Madam Mayor. I will wait the responses.
Thank you, Mr. Davidoff. Would we like to start with Mr. Dodge on the POCD, or want to go to Mr. Dumais? Mr. Dumais, let's start with Mr. Dumais, and then Mr. Dodge can fill in if there's anything that's not covered. Mr. Dumais.
Again, Todd Dumais, Town Planner. Madam Mayor, through you to Councilor Davidoff. I can't think of a specific issue that was a minority position that wasn't incorporated into the document, Councilor Davidoff. What I can say is through that engagement process, particularly with some of our boards and commissions, I think our Clean Energy Commission in particular had hoped that the document was an even stronger statement around climate action. In their eyes, they were hoping it was stronger. I think I don't want to speak for Commissioner Ahern, the chairman, but really that's not necessarily the role or the vehicle of the POCD. And I think that this plan does a very nice balancing act at addressing that noted concern. It's certainly a council priority, and recommend some specific actions and strategies we could pursue as a town and community to addressing those issues. That would probably be the one that comes to mind.
Thank you, Mr. Dumais. Mr. Davidoff, so the follow-up now, you want to, would you like to hear how the POCD, how this triggers the clock for us and the logistics of that? Yes? Yes. Okay, Mr. Dodge, can you please elaborate?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. So typically when the council, well, first of all, I think it's important to remember the length of this process. The town council typically adopts the town planning and zoning typically adopts a POCD once every 10 years. And when the town council receives the POCD under the town charter, there's typically a 15-day clock that begins to run, in which you may disapprove the plan of conservation development if you wish. And you may then reconstitute yourselves as the land use authority and make any changes that you desire. We're in a bit of a gray zone this year, however, because of Governor Lamont's Executive Order 7I, which extended the deadlines for all decisions on land use matters, which would include this, and it applies to charter provisions as well, by 90 days. And so in effect, you would have 105 days in which to disapprove of this. Madam Mayor, my recommendation would be not to use that entire 105 days. As Mr. Dumais can probably better explain, there are consequences to not having the POCD complete. It makes it more difficult for the town to apply for grants and to apply for grants from the state. And so my recommendation would be that if the town council is inclined, if you feel that you would not likely disapprove the plan, that perhaps at your next meeting you might want to adopt a resolution in effect approving the plan and cutting off that clock so that the POCD can be officially adopted. and so that the town can move forward with applying for various grants.
Thank you, Mr. Dodge. Mr. Davidoff, do you have any further questions or comments on the process? No. Okay, other questions, comments? I can't see everyone's hands, so again, let me know if someone else sees somebody and their mic is open. Well, I know Mr. Hart, but any other counselors? No? Okay, Mr. Hart.
Thank you, Mayor. Matt Hart, Town Manager. I would also like to extend my thanks to Mr. Ahern and his fellow members of the TPZ for their very good and extensive work. They all bring a lot to the table in their role as residents and professionals working in town. I'd like to thank the consulting team and our town staff, Mr. Dumais in particular, who spent countless hours on this very important project. And as Mr. Dumais said, the feedback we received from our council members was very helpful and helped inform the plan. And this plan is a roadmap. You know, it's a roadmap for development as well as other key projects that we'd like to fund. Understanding that with COVID-19, you know, we're in a somewhat different status right now, but still, this plan will serve to guide development for the next decade or more, and also serve as a springboard for other important initiatives as we critically look at some of our zoning in various parts of town, like the TOD corridor that was mentioned earlier. So just want to thank everyone for their good, strong efforts, and I think it's going to be an excellent work product for us.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. I also want to just add, though, if we don't have to wait 10 years to do another POCD if we don't feel that that's the appropriate time for arrest. Has to be done after 10 years, but it can be done. You can do it prior to that. But I don't see that happening, but you never know. Life changes very quickly, and 5 years in today's world with the innovation that we have going on, and you know, with the world changing beneath our feet, you know, there may be cause to at least even look at specific parts of it, to redo it if it's something that we want to do. But I would recommend, I will make the motion to receive and we will do a roll call vote. But I would like to, for our Corporation Counsel, the answer to that, I would like to put this on the agenda for our next meeting, unless I hear otherwise. Okay, with that, we will do a roll call vote to receive the POCD. Matt, your hand is like all over the screen. Okay, so roll call vote, Ms. Labrot.
Ms. Blanks.
Yes.
Ms. Cantor.
Yes.
Mr. Davidoff.
Yes.
Ms. Fay.
Yes.
Mr. Gold.
Yes.
Ms. Kerrigan.
Councilor Kerrigan, yes.
Mr. Sweeney.
Liam Sweeney, yes.
Mr. Winograd.
Yes.
And Mr. Williams.
Chris Williams, yes.
Thank you. It's unanimous.
Thank you, Ms. Labrot, and thank you to the counselors. This is Mayor Cantor again. And so the motion has been made to receive. We have no unfinished business. We are moving to new business. And the first item that we have, 6A, is a resolution to adopt a revised budget schedule for the 2020-2021 fiscal year budget. And I'm going to make a motion to adopt, and I'm going to kick it over to the town manager to talk about this schedule. Mr. Hart?
Thank you, Mayor. Matt Hart, Town Manager. Can you hear me okay?
It's a little soft. If you can turn it up just a bit.
Okay, I'll put the earbuds back in a moment. But just to speak to this quickly, we've prepared this proposed resolution. It's in keeping with the governor's Executive Order 7C, which extends the municipal budget process for up to 30 days. The schedule does include 2 public hearings. The first one would be at 2 p.m. on April 27th, and the second one at 6 p.m. on April 30th. That's in keeping with your usual practice. This schedule further contemplates that the Board of Education will adopt a budget by May 17th, and that the Council will adopt the full town budget by May 26th. And actually, we'd like to do that even earlier if possible. We'll see how the schedule plays out. So staff is recommending council approval of the attached resolution. Corporation Counsel and I can take any questions.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions for Mr. Hart before we proceed? We did send out a communication from both the minority leader and the deputy mayor, who's also the finance chair, on this revised schedule. It's tight, as budget season always is, but we wanted to make sure that we stick to as close a schedule as we usually do. We do have the workshops, which are a little different than the committee meeting structure that we've used in the past. And we hope this actually makes it easier for the public, for us to get through the budget process, but also for the public to follow it as well. Mr. Dodge, is there any further comment from you, or?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. No, I think that everybody's appreciative of the flexibility that the governor gave towns with regard to budget adoption. The COVID-19 crisis hit at a critical time in the timeline for most municipalities. In fact, the town manager, I believe it was the same day that the governor declared the state of emergency, that the town manager presented his budget to all of you. In fact, I was telling somebody else, I can recall that earlier that day, we had sat in a crowded room with emergency operations to discuss the town's response, and the thought of doing that today just shows you how much things have changed in just a little over a month. And so the flexibility is very much appreciated. I think, again, the town should be very proud that the process that is set forth in this document is very, very similar to the process that the town would have otherwise undergone. The only major difference is that the town manager will be allowed to amend his budget later this evening if this is adopted, which I believe is prudent under the circumstances. And the public hearings, we'll still have 2 of them, but they'll be held virtually. And we will again have write-in and call-in options for both of those hearings for members of the public. And notice will be posted shortly after if this motion is adopted.
Thank you, Mr. Dodge. That helps. I also want to thank both Corporation Counsel and Mr. Hart and Mr. Privatera for helping to organize and set up a schedule that I think is it makes sense. We hope that we adopt prior to the deadline dates. And as you will see from the schedule, we have a tentative May 12th adoption date. But if we can't get the work done before, that date will be pushed off. Any other questions from the council? All right, with that, we will do a roll call vote. Ms. Labrot.
Ms. Blanks.
Councilor Blanks, yes.
Ms. Cantor.
Yes.
Mr. Davidoff.
Councilman Davidoff, yes.
Ms. Fay.
Councilor Mary Fay, yes.
Mr. Gold.
Yes.
Ms. Kerrigan.
Councilor Kerrigan, yes.
Mr. Sweeney.
Liam Sweeney, yes.
Mr. Winograd.
Yes.
And Mr. Williams.
Christopher Williams, yes.
Thank you. That's unanimous.
Thank you, Ms. Labrot. Thank you, councilors. 6B, introduction of amendments to 2021 fiscal year budget as proposed by the town manager. Mr. Hart, this is for you.
Thank you, Mayor. Matt Hart, Town Manager. I'm going to make some initial comments and work through the first few spreadsheets that you will see tonight. And then we'll turn to our Finance Director, Mr. Privatera, to add his comments, and then we'll be happy to take questions that council members may have. So if you can open up the item under 6B, which we posted just before the start of the meeting. And some introductory comments first to set the stage, if you will. So as you'll recall, on March 10th, we presented what I viewed at that point in time as a very responsible budget and capital plan for FY21. I don't know about you, but 6 weeks ago seems like years ago at this point, given what we've been through. And over the past several weeks, the COVID-19 crisis has literally changed the world with some very significant ramifications for our economy. We know that we stand to lose significant non-tax revenue during the last quarter of this fiscal year. And to accommodate this shortfall, we have initiated a spending and a hiring freeze. We have also laid off 130 part-time employees, some of us who've been with us for many, many years. At the local level, we're very concerned about the impact of this crisis on our property taxpayers. So consequently, council leadership, Mayor Cantor, Minority Leader Gold, have asked me to submit revisions to my proposed budget that would eliminate the need for a property tax increase. I've approached the superintendent of schools, Tom Moore, and he's been very, very willing to work with me in this regard. He's been a great partner. So tonight, we're going to take a look at a summary of the proposed revisions, including a requested adjustment from the superintendent's proposed FY21 budget. He intends to present his proposed revisions to his budget to the Board of Education at its meeting tomorrow evening. The proposed revisions on both the town side and the board side, as well as for capital financing, in aggregate would result in a 1.14% increase in expenditures, as well as a slight tax decrease for most taxpayers. These revisions will lead to a reduction in some services, and we'll review the ramifications of those service reductions at our upcoming budget workshops. However, I do want to emphasize that the revised budget, it's designed to maintain our essential services, the essential services provided by our award-winning school district and our town departments, and to preserve West Hartford's quality of life. What makes us special and attracts people here. We're approaching this situation as a 2 to 3 year recovery period. It could be longer, hopefully not, as we seek to restore services as the economy improves. I also wish to emphasize here that there are many uncertainties. We do not know when or how we'll be reopening town and school facilities to the public, and how those plans may impact our expenditures. The superintendent and his leadership team have developed a wide variety of contingency plans for whenever the schools reopen. And some things, including possible alternate schedules, could lead to increased costs that really are impossible to quantify right now. Similarly, on the town side, the budget revisions that I'm about to present you, they contemplate that the town pools will be closed this summer. Not that we would close all town camps, we haven't made that decision, but that the pools will be closed this summer for a significant savings. If we are in a position to reopen them based on public health and other needs, other issues, we'll need to be able to handle that cost. So the larger point I'm trying to make here is that we need to be prepared to handle various contingencies during a very, very uncertain time, which is why it's important that we do not exhaust our reserves in any one year. We will also need to look at the proposed capital improvement program that I presented back on March 10th. I will be recommending that we trim back some of our plan list of projects for the first 2 years of the plan in order to lower our debt service costs for FY22 and FY23. I would like to thank the members of our management team, my colleagues at the school district, Mr. Moore and others, and in particular, our finance director, Mr. Privatera, who's done just an excellent job, I think, in preparing this package for your consideration. So now, looking at what we posted in the packet, and hopefully you all have it on your screen. and it's just 3 documents in total, all wrapped up into one. So what you will see on the first page, this is a summary of the budget I proposed back on March 10th. And you can see the revenues on the top of the page, town services down below. And we proposed an increase on the expenditure side of 4.12%. That would have required a tax increase of 3.59% for the average taxpayer in West Hartford. So that's what we proposed some weeks ago on March 10th. The next slide is what we're presenting you this evening. And as you'll see, it's an overall budget of 1.14%. On the town side, town services would increase on an expenditure basis 1.92%. A major factor there is the operating expense column. You see the increase there of 7.65%. Those are things like the MDC, waste management costs, pension, others that are to a large extent outside of our control and are driving increases on the expenditure side. The Board of Education, the number I'm presenting you with this evening would be an increase next fiscal year of less than 1%, 0.75%. And again, this is a request I have made from the superintendent of schools. The Board of Education has not endorsed this yet, and he will be reviewing this, presenting it to the board for the first time tomorrow evening. So I did want to make sure to point out that caveat, if you will. On the capital financing side, we would see a slight decrease for next fiscal year. So if we make these various reductions, we would actually see a slight tax decrease next fiscal year. Moving on to the next and final slide, which is labeled Amendments to the Town Manager's General Fund Proposed Budget. We'd see a slight tax decrease from 41.80 to 41.74. So let me pause there. You know, that's an overview, and I will ask Mr. Privatera to walk through our recommended changes. Now, for this evening, we don't want to get into the ramifications of the proposed changes in great detail. You know, this is an overview tonight. We want to save that discussion for the budget workshops that we have coming over the next week or two. And we will ask the directors who manage those departments to assist us in talking about the potential ramifications of these adjustments and how we would manage. Mr. Privatera?
Thank you, Mr. Hart. No, that's me.
Sorry, Mayor, back to you.
No, that's okay. That's okay. And I also want to thank Mr. Privatera for his hard work on this. And there is a strategy on why we are doing these adjusted budget numbers tonight. And I want to talk about that a little bit after Mr. Privatera goes through. I'll have actually Mr. Dodge elaborate on that a little bit on the reasoning for this. So Mr. Privatera, our financial director, thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Town Manager Hart. I'd like to go over some of the major changes rather than getting into each line item, just some general areas. Expenditure-wise, on the town side, the town's budget will be reduced. The operating general fund budget would be reduced by about 4.2 million. As Town Manager Hart mentioned, we are seeking a 4.6 million reduction from the Board of Ed. Hopefully that'll happen tomorrow night at tomorrow night's board meeting, for a total budget reduction of $8.8 million on the expense side. On the revenue side, we have a couple of adjustments. We're assuming that we're going to lose about $210,000 on interest as a result of the tax deferral program. On non-tax revenue, we're assuming about a $250,000 loss on interest income as it relates to the drop in the interest rates. And we're assuming about $175,000 loss in recreation programming activity funds, primarily due to the closure of the pools. We are expecting an increase of about $172,000 as a transfer from the capital funds project to reimburse our capital management group personnel about 70% of wages and benefits. And finally, we're identifying the usage of $1.5 million in fund balance. All in all, a revenue increase of $1,037,000. Together, total adjustment of roughly $9.9 million. What does this do? As Town Manager Hart indicated, it will, if passed as stands, it will reduce the mill rate from 43.3 proposed to a 41.74 revised proposal, which again is a 0.14% decrease. I'd like to go over some significant adjustments on a department by department basis, not to touch every line item, but just to talk about some major changes. In the fire department, we're proposing to reduce the overtime by about $160,000. Hopefully we'll fully staff the department, and I'm sure that as Chief Priest said, we'll try to control overtime as best we can. In the police department, now the reduction is indicated to be $594,000, but really the bulk of that, about $368,000, is the transfer of 2 police officers, all their benefits and expenses over to the parking fund to revert back to a model we've been using a few years ago, which leaves the adjustments in the police department to a little over $200,000. The primary adjustment being a hiring lag that we're imposing due to a number of vacancies that they have. In community development, a reduction of $172,000. That's the elimination of 1 new office operations specialist that we included in the town manager's initial budget proposal. A hiring lag of $70,000 based on a vacancy that's in the department, and other miscellaneous adjustments within the department. Public Works, an overall reduction of $416,000. We're assuming a $75,000 hiring lag. The assumption is based on vacancies that we assume will happen through the course of the year. We're reducing temporary payroll by $179,000. The bulk of that is related to grounds maintenance. I've made some miscellaneous adjustments to snow accounts, primarily the contractual services account in snow. The reduction was based on what last year's actual was. Obviously, we can't control the elements, and if it snows more than we anticipate, we'll have to cover that one way or the other. One other adjustment I made, there was a new program that was proposed in the town manager's budget. It was a parts management program that was operated by an outside firm. DPW Director Phillips is adamant that this program can save him money and it can save him time. It'll release his supervisor and most of his mechanics to concentrate on their work rather than shuttling back and forth to order and find parts to fix vehicles. I've reduced that funding from a full year to half a year, so I cut $53,000 out of that line item. In facilities, reducing temporary payroll by $55,000 or 15%. That temporary payroll is primarily used for facility cleaning and maintaining, and also reducing utilities by $150,000. And we're going to make that up by using a fund balance in the utility services fund. Leisure and social services, a reduction of $432,000. Temporary payroll of reduced $98,000 across the board, including some at senior centers and Elmwood Community Center. But the biggest reduction of over $340,000 is the closing of the pools over the summer. But again, with those reductions on the expense side, we will lose about $175,000 in recreational program that's part of this plan as well. The library, a reduction of $302,000 in temporary payroll. That represents roughly a 20% cut in library operations. Contingency, we've identified $675,000. We'd like to start a dialogue with unions to see if we can address some of the shortfalls that we have, and I'll leave that up to the town manager to discuss later. As Mayor Cantor said, we had a pension board meeting this morning, and we were fortunate enough to amend our pension contribution for next year due to a new calculations in some of the mortality tables that we use. That will result in a $648,000 reduction from the town side, and also $190,000 savings on the board side. And finally, in employee benefits, we have a reserve level for uninsured claims, roughly a $1.5 million. As far as I know, and as far as anyone knows, we've never had an uninsured claim. So I asked the risk management group if we could reduce that by $500,000, and they agreed that it would not significantly impact us. So with that, the town is reducing its contribution to the risk fund by $500,000. So those are the significant amendments to the town manager's budget. Again, all the amendments totaling about $9.9 million and resulting in a mill rate of 41.74 mils. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Privateer. Remember, the discussions of the line items in the budget and the content of the budget we will talk about in the workshops. But questions on the process and the reasoning, what I'd like to do is go to Mr. Dodge now for an explanation on why it's important for the town manager to resubmit a budget and we receive that budget and put it on the record. Mr. Dodge.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As I think what you were asking about is in our town charter, we have what's called an automatic budget adoption clause, which means that when the town manager presents his initial proposed budget, the town charter envisions a scenario in which the town council may not actually vote to adopt a budget. That could happen because there was gridlock on the council or for other reasons that the council wasn't able to meet. And if that were to happen and the town council did not take action to adopt a budget, the town manager's proposed budget automatically becomes the budget for the new fiscal year. That's why we felt it was prudent to allow the town manager to amend his proposed budget because as you've heard tonight, the world has changed so much in the month since the town manager first introduced his budget. And so for purposes of the automatic budget adoption clause in our town charter, this, as it amends the town manager's initial proposed budget, together would now become the town manager's proposed budget as amended. And if the council were to fail to adopt a budget, this would become the town budget. I want to emphasize that I don't know that there's a time, certainly that I can recall, or having talked to other staff in recent history, that the town council has ever failed to adopt a budget. And so there's every expectation that the council, after deliberating and debating this document, would have an opportunity to make changes and would adopt a budget by May 26th. So this is sort of a break glass in case of emergency procedure here, so that we have a workable budget document in the event that for whatever reason, the town council were not able to adopt a budget by May 26th.
Thank you, Mr. Dodge. That's exactly what I wanted you to explain. So good job. We have not been faced with a pandemic before during budget season in this way. And when we were talking about this, there's a lot of unknowns. So we just wanted to make sure that we were almost insured with the new scenario if God forbid, counselors couldn't be here for one reason or another. So, but we expect that everyone's going to remain healthy and that we are going to resume the process of a thorough budget adoption process with all of us involved. So with that, and if there are any questions, I don't see any texts, but if there's any questions on the receipt of the town manager's budget, again, many more discussions to follow. We will do a roll call vote. Ms. Labrot. Does anybody see any questions? Okay, so I already made the motion to to receive. We will go to a roll call vote. Ms. Labrot.
Ms. Blanks.
Councilor Blanks, yes.
Ms. Cantor.
Yes.
Mr. Davidoff.
Councilor Davidoff, yes.
Ms. Fay.
Yes, Councilor Mary Fay, yes.
Mr. Gold.
Counselor Lee Gold, yes.
Ms. Kerrigan,
Councilor Beth Kerrigan, yes.
Mr. Sweeney,
Liam Sweeney, yes.
Mr. Winograd,
Ben Winograd, yes.
and Mr. Williams.
Chris Williams, yes.
Thank you. It's unanimous.
Thank you, Ms. Labrot. Thank you, Mr. Hart. Thank you, Mr. Privatera, for all of your work on this. It's been, again, a lot of research and work to get to a point where we can work off of it. So appreciate that very much. And also the partnership with the superintendent of schools. And tomorrow night, he will be presenting his budget to his board. With that, we will go to 6C. This is a resolution to authorize the issuance of tax anticipation notes in an amount not to exceed $40 million to pay town's expenses and obligations for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2020. I make a motion to adopt, but I'm going to go to the town manager for an explanation on this.
Thank you, Mayor. Matt Hart, Town Manager. And Mr. Privatera can also assist with any questions that councilors may have. So for background, Governor Lamont issued Executive Order 7W, dated April 9th, which required all towns to participate in either a tax deferment program or a low interest program, or both, in conjunction with the collection of municipal taxes. And as council will recall, you adopted both programs. It's really unknown at this point in time what the magnitude of the potential response to the deferment program will be. So we are seeking this authorization in case we need it. Not that we're going to move to issue this tomorrow, but only in case we need this. So the issuance of tax anticipation notes, the acronym is TANs. They would allow us to raise cash for a short period of time, which would provide us with the operating monies we need while we're waiting for the tax revenues to come in. And that 90-day deferment period will expire on October 1st of 2020. If the applications to the deferral program are more minimal, and we're able to collect enough cash during the first quarter of next fiscal year to fund our operations, then we won't need to take this step. But this resolution would give us the flexibility to issue up to $40 million in TANs. So the fiscal impact of this, the fiscal impact of the issuance of TANs, it would really vary depending on how much we were to issue, as well as the type of issuance, whether we would do a what's called a private placement with a particular financial institution or through a competitive or negotiated sale, the same way we issue general obligation bonds each and every year. Since we really don't know at this point if these would be necessary, we can't project with certainty the cost for the type of transaction. However, just for purposes of illustration, based on a 2% interest rate and a 6-month repayment period, it would cost the town about $10,000 for every 1 million that of TANs that we would issue. So again, we're just asking for this authority in case we need to exercise it. We're hoping we do not, but in case we do, we want to be prepared. So I'll pause there, Mayor, and Mr. Privatera and I can assist with any questions councilors may have.
Thank you, Mr. Hart, and we'll go to questions. And if Mr. Privatera has input, then we can. Any questions?
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Yes.
Just wanted to point out. Sorry, Pete Privatera, Finance Director.
Thank you.
Just wanted to point out that, as Town Manager Hart said, there are a lot of unknowns with this new program. So I sat down with our revenue collector, Helene Lefkowitz, and our financial operations manager, Lisa Newton, and we modeled a variety of different scenarios. And I think the worst case scenario we came up with was with the 40 million. So we'll probably have a good idea of where we stand probably mid-July. And if we have to issue, we'd probably want to issue late July, early August. But it's our expectation that we should have enough cash on hand that we won't issue. But again, as the town manager said, this is an insurance policy for us, because if we had to issue and we already have the authorization, we can do it relatively quickly. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Privatera, and I want to thank both of you for preparing this resolution in case of a worst case scenario, and many unknowns. Any other further questions, comments? Mr. Sweeney, you're up.
Yeah. This is great. Really appreciate
Sweeney, Town Councilor. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah. Sorry. Hi, this is Liam Sweeney, Town Councilor. I really appreciate all the work that Matt and Peter, you guys have done to put this together. I just have a quick question. What has been the response so far from the community? Has there been, I know that you're ballparking this number, but just generally, do you know where we are currently in regards to input from the community on this program?
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. Mr. Hart, do you have anything?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Matt Hart, Town Manager, and Mr. Privatera can add to my response through the Mayor. So we're still promulgating the rules, Councilor Sweeney. Town staff is working with Deputy Corporation Counsel, Verano, to put the rules in. And really, the tax deferral program is for the 7/1 July 1st tax bills. The deferral program is a slightly different period, but we're promulgating the rules right now, and we should be making them available to the public to explain how both programs would work within the next few weeks. So we don't know yet what the anticipated demand will be.
Through you, Madam Mayor.
Go ahead, Mr. Sweeney.
We haven't had any communication or anybody express interest.
Mr. Hart, do you know if people have? I will say that I have. I've had a few questions, and Mr. Dakers has fielded some of those questions so far. But there's not. This is new, and I know that there's research on the rules, and people are expecting to hear back. But there has not been a lot of outreach, from what I understand, or a lot of people calling in with the questions yet. But is that the case, Mr. Hart?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Matt Hart, Town Manager. So we did issue a release when you adopted the program, and we have received some very positive feedback from the community. But again, we haven't received any official applications as of yet. So we'll be providing more information about how the whole program is going to work, what the application process will look like, et cetera.
Thank you. But if residents have questions on the process, is Joe the right person, our assessor, the right person to call, or is it Ms. Lefkowitz? How would you recommend that we refer people for more information?
Matt Hart, Town Manager, through you, Mayor. The best staff person would be our revenue collector, Ms. Lefkowitz.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. Anything further, Mr. Sweeney?
Oh, thank you very much.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Let me know if I'm not seeing a hand. Okay. With that, we will go to a roll call. Ms. Labrot.
Madam Mayor, I believe Councilor Davidoff had his hand raised.
I'm sorry, Mr. Davidoff. Thank you.
Councilman Davidoff, thank you, Madam Mayor. I have two questions with respect to the issuance or the possible issuance of a tax anticipation note. The first is, did we also explore the possibility of issuing what are known as BANs? instead of TANs. And the second question I have is the potential to issue either. Would this require any type of approval by the state of Connecticut OMB office with respect to this type of debt?
Two good questions, Mr. Davidoff. Mr. Hart?
Thank you, Mayor. Matt Hart, Town Manager. I am not sure that bans would be applicable in this case. I think a TAN, the tax anticipation note, is the more appropriate instrument. But I would defer to Mr. Privatera to elaborate and respond to the Deputy Mayor's second question.
Mr. Privatera, would you like to respond to Mr. Davidoff?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Pete Privatera, Finance Director. As the town manager noted, bans are bond anticipation notes, and we would not be bonding. We would not be issuing notes in preparation to issue final bonds. That's why we're using TANs in anticipation of tax revenue coming in to repay those TANs. There is no, as far as I know, and I checked with bond counsel, there is no requirement for any approval from the state to issue TANs. The only requirement is we have to repay those TANs within the fiscal year period that they're issued.
Thank you, Mr. Privatera. Anything further, Mr. Davidoff? Mr. Gold, I understand you have a question.
This is Lee Gold through Mayor Cantor. I was just simply indicating that Leon Davidoff had his hand up.
Thank you. I wasn't sure because I got a text at you. Okay. Thank you. Appreciate you all watching out for each other. It's very helpful, especially people that talk with their hands. Okay. Thank you so much. Anybody else that would like any questions? All right. With that, the motion's on the table. We will do a roll call, Ms. Labrot.
Ms. Blanks.
Counselor Blanks, yes.
Ms. Cantor.
Yes.
Mr. Davidoff.
Town Councilman Davidoff, yes.
Ms. Fay.
Town Councilor Mary Fay, yes.
Mr. Gold.
Counselor Gold, yes.
Ms. Kerrigan.
Town Councilor Beth Kerrigan, yes.
Mr. Sweeney.
Liam Sweeney, yes.
Mr. Winograd.
Ben Winograd, yes.
And Mr. Williams.
Chris Williams, yes.
Thank you. It's unanimous.
Thank you, Ms. Labrot. Thank you, counselors. The next item is 6D. I make a motion to adopt a resolution to close the Fernridge Park ADA compliant restroom capital project. Mr. Hart.
Thank you, Mayor. Matt Hart, Town Manager. I think as the council is well aware, every year the town receives a community development block grant. Those are federal monies that are passed through the state. And those help us finance affordable housing, very important affordable housing and related projects. A recent project that we've completed, which was to refurbish restrooms at Fernridge Park to make them ADA compliant. That's another use of the CDBG, another allowable use of CDBG funds. We had included that project in our 2018 action plan. And we had a projected budget at that time of $175,000. So we established an account. We appropriated funds for this project. We completed the project under budget. So we have a balance that we would like to roll in to the larger CDBG fund. A balance of a little over $104,000 that we would utilize for future CDBG projects. So occasionally we do this, when we're able to complete a project under budget, we will ask you to just roll those funds back into the program so that we can use them for future projects. And that's what we're requesting in this case.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hart. Any questions for the town manager? Raise your hand high. I don't see any. No texts.
Carol Blanks. Carol Blanks is asking.
Okay. Thank you, Carol. Ms. Blanks, go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, Counselor Blanks. Town Manager Hart, my question is just a quick question in terms of what are some other uses for that CDBG grant funding is used for? So you mentioned housing and then this ADA bathroom. Can you give me an idea of what are some other projects that the fund would be used for, especially since you're rolling this back in?
Matt Hart, Town Manager, through you,
Yes.
Mayor.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Mr. Hart, go ahead.
Yeah, so thank you for the question, Councilor Blanks. This is a very good program that is used across the nation for many important projects. So it can fund, we have used it in West Hartford for many, many years to fund a housing rehabilitation program. And that provides low interest loans to people who meet the income thresholds set by the program to complete very important projects at their homes, very essential projects. It could be a new roof, could be a new boiler, insulation, windows, you name it. And we have used that program, the Housing Rehabilitation Program, very successfully for decades. The program can also be utilized to fund ADA improvements anywhere in town, like the Fern Ridge Park here. The money can be used to make improvements at senior centers and senior living facilities. And it can even be used for certain infrastructure projects in income eligible neighborhoods. So there are certain census tracts in town that are deemed eligible. So road work, sidewalks, etc., in those neighborhoods can be partially financed through these grant monies. So those are just some examples of what we utilize the monies for over many years now in West Hartford, as well as other municipalities in Connecticut and across the nation.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. Ms. Blanks?
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Mr. Hart.
Thank you. We do have a public process on that, on approving, right, that money and those grants, correct? Mr. Hart?
Yes, Mayor. Matt Hart, Town Manager. Every year, our staff will present a proposal to you, a recommended use of the monies, and we need to take that to public hearing. And at times, we've received public input that we've been able to incorporate as well.
One last comment now that Ms. Blanks brought it up. There was a communication and outreach by our staff for CDBG grants, correct? There was a communication.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, through you, Mayor. Matt Hart, Town Manager. Yes, we recently issued a solicitation like we do every year in requirement with the rules.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. This is something that mayors feel very, very strongly about, as all community and council members do, that this money goes a long way and is run. We have a very robust program and it's run very well. And we're really appreciative of the federal money that we do get. With that, any other questions from any councilors? Give me a shout if I'm not seeing a hand. Okay, with that, roll call, Ms. Labrot?
Ms. Blanks?
Councilor Carol Blanks, yes.
Ms. Cantor?
Yes.
Mr. Davidoff?
Town Councilor Davidoff, yes.
Ms. Fay?
Town Councilor Mary Fay, yes.
Mr. Gold?
Town Councilor Lee Gold, yes.
Ms. Kerrigan?
Councilor Beth Kerrigan, yes.
Mr. Sweeney?
William Sweeney, yes.
Mr. Winograd?
Ben Winograd, yes.
And Mr. Williams?
Chris Williams, yes.
Thank you. It's unanimous.
Thank you, Ms. Labrot. Thank you, councilors. We are going to 6E. This is I move to adopt a resolution to establish a school building committee and appoint members thereto for construction projects at William H. Hall High School, Sedgwick Middle School, and Norfolk Elementary School. Motion is made to adopt. Mr. Hart, can you explain this?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Matt Hart, Town Manager. So as described, the resolution would establish a school building committee to oversee 3 important projects at 3 of our public schools. And the town is required to establish the committee in order to receive school construction monies from the state. And you actually approved the submission of the grant application at your February 11th meeting. The building committee would be comprised of 4 members or their designees. The 4 members would be the assistant superintendent of schools, the director of planning and budget for the public schools, our director of financial services, and our director of plant and facility services. The 3 school projects, and again, you had approved the application back on February 11th, partial roof replacement at Hall High, partial roof replacement at Sedgwick Middle School, and the asbestos abatement related to a flooring project at Norfelt Elementary School. The town's current reimbursement rate is at 38.57%. The estimated construction costs for all 3 projects is $1,152,000. The state reimbursement would total a little over $444,000. So you see how important and helpful this grant program is. So we're respectfully requesting your approval of the attached resolution. Happy to take any questions that councilors may have.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. Any questions for Mr. Hart? Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Actually, through you, I just have a comment. You know, as we go into the budget process here, some of the drivers that we have are sort of institutionalized in our budget, and unfortunately, we have a lot of infrastructure associated with our schools, and no one likes to talk about it. I don't like to talk about it because it's uncomfortable, and we have great schools, but we have declining enrollment over the years, and one of the things we're going to have to keep doing is incurring these costs to renovate and maintain these very old buildings. And I just think that's something we need to keep in the back of our mind as we approach this budget season. So thank you. I just want to share that comment.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Appreciate the comment. I don't know if you want to respond at all, Mr. Hart, but are there any other questions or comments? Ms. Blanks.
Thank you, through you, Madam Mayor, and for you, Mr. Hart. Just a quick question, and I agree, just based on my experience on the board, that these are very needed projects. And it's funny because we know we have a great school district, but these are some of the hidden things that we don't see as our aging infrastructure, which is severely needed. But my question in terms of the committee members, in terms of overseeing the project, how often will the committee members be meeting? And I'm sure that there's going to be a person or maybe a subcommittee appointed to making sure that the project stays on time and within cost.
Thank you, Ms. Blanks. Mr. Hart?
Thank you, Mayor. Matt Hart, Town Manager. Councilor Blanks, I don't know the exact answer to your question, but that is one of the responsibilities of the committee, is to make sure that the project stays on schedule and on budget. And you'll see that the committee is comprised of staff members. And I think that is in part due to the nature of the project. If we were looking at a more extensive project, such as building a new school, if you will, the committee under that scenario would likely include representatives from the larger community at large, in addition to staff. But this committee will, they'll be on top of it, making sure that the project is completed in a timely way and on budget.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. Ms. Blanks, are you all
Thank
set?
you, Madam Mayor, Mr. Hart.
Thank you. Any further questions on the building committee? All right. With that, we will do a roll call vote. Ms. Labrot.
Ms. Blanks.
Councilor Carol Blanks, yes.
Ms. Cantor.
Yes.
Mr. Davidoff.
Councilman Davidoff, yes.
Ms. Fay.
Counselor Mary Fay, yes.
Mr. Gold.
Town Councilor Lee Gold, yes.
Ms. Kerrigan.
Councilor Beth Kerrigan, yes.
Mr. Sweeney.
Liam Sweeney, yes.
Mr. Winograd.
Ben Winograd, yes.
And Mr. Williams.
Chris Williams, yes.
Thank you. It's unanimous.
Thank you, Ms. Labrot. The last item before we get to announcements is a resolution authorizing the execution of a permanent maintenance easement and agreement with the state of Connecticut to support the construction of the Trout Brook Trail. I move that we refer this to Town Planning and Zoning Commission pursuant to Section 6, Chapter 13 of the Town Charter and Section 824 of the Connecticut General Statutes. Any further questions on this? Mr. Dodge, can we engage in discussion on this, or can the town manager explain this one as we are referring it?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There's no rule that prevents you from debating or discussing a motion that you're referring. It's a little bit irregular, but if the town manager wants to provide some context for this, he's more than welcome to. I would also note we do have Deputy Corporation Counsel Gina Verano on the phone. Not to put her on the spot, but I do know that she has put significant work into this resolution. I'm sure that she could also summarize.
Thank you. We haven't heard anything about this for a while, so I thought a little refresher might be helpful. Maybe Ms. Verano, would you like to? Or Mr. And why don't we start with Mr. Hart, and then if Mr. Hart, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Matt Hart, Town Manager. I'm sorry I had to plug my device in, so I'm operating without earbuds right now. Hopefully you can hear me okay. So a little background on this. The engineering division had obtained 2 grants to construct 2 separate sections of the Trout Brook Trail. One was a grant of $224,000 from DEEP for Phase 5, and Phase 5 is Farmington Avenue to Fern Street. The other was a $512,000 grant from CROG for the Phase 6 section, which runs from Fern to Duffield. The engineering division completed the design of both of these sections, and then we sought permission from DEEP to proceed with construction. Portions of the trail will be built on property that we own, but some stretches will also be built on state-owned land, and the entire trail, the entire portion of it, is contained within the flood control facility that was constructed back in the 1980s. DEEP is requiring an easement in order to access their land and build the trail, as well as an agreement regarding our future maintenance responsibilities. So in addition to maintaining the finished trail, our Department of Public Works will also need to assume certain maintenance obligations within the Phase 5 and Phase 6 sections, as we have done for other sections of the trail that we've completed. What are these obligations? They'll include mowing the channel. They'll also include applying herbicide where needed and in accordance with state regulations. We're going to have to inspect throughout the entire flood control area, the bridges, the culverts, the swales, also prior to major storms. And we have to inspect the Grassmere pumping station on a quarterly basis. Under this agreement, we expect those responsibilities will cost approximately $6,000 a year. However, we think the benefits of the trail to our community at large far outweigh this cost. I do want to thank Deputy Corporation Counsel Verano for her excellent work on this. This is something that we've been seeking to get over the goal line for a period of years now. There were a couple of key sticking points in our negotiation with DEEP, and Councilor Verano in particular was able to work to a successful compromise and come to an agreement that serves the town's interests and also meets the requirements of the state. So I will pause there and ask Attorney Verano to add to my comments.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. Attorney Verano.
Madam Mayor, Gina Verano, Deputy Corporation Counsel. First of all, Matt, great job summarizing the document itself and the need for the document. I'll just add 2 specific points. One is that the town's obligation to maintain the flood control area extends beyond phases 5 and 6. It's not just in 5 and 6 itself. So 2 components. We have to maintain the trail, which is going to be new phases 5 and 6, but we also have obligations to maintain the flood control area outside of phases 5 and 6. Part of the reason why the negotiations went on for so long was the town's commitment to basically not assume any more obligations than it was doing now, and to keep any financial costs down. So when we say that there is an additional cost of only $6,000, that comes after months and months of negotiations with the state, and a job well done by John Phillips in guiding us as to what the town already does and its maintenance obligations, and not to extend those much further than they currently exist now. What you have before you is the resolution. As we mentioned, it does need to be referred to TP&Z because it is the grant of an easement, actually multiple easements over state property for two purposes. One, for constructing and maintaining the trail, and secondly, for maintaining the flood control area. Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney Verano. That was very helpful. Any questions for town staff? Ms. Blanks.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you, Carol Blanks, Town Councilor. So question for either Mr. Hart or Attorney Deputy Verano. That is, how many phases to this project?
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Blanks. Mr. Hart?
Matt Hart, Town Manager. Ms. Verano can correct me if I'm wrong. I believe we're going to have, I think, 7 phases in its entirety.
8.
Thank you. Thank you,
I
Mr.
stand
Hart.
corrected.
Yes,
Thank you.
yes. Okay. Thank you. Any other questions, Ms. Blanks?
Oh,
It has been, I do, it has been, I don't even know how many years. So it's been very incremental, but it's a wonderful resource. Any other comments, questions? I'm looking. I don't see anybody's hand. So, oh, Mr. Winograd. Mr. Winograd.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to mention this has been going on for a long time. It really started when the trees came down, and we had the whole issue with dredging the water, dredging the brook. And I know initially when we were looking for the town to gone through our committees, a lot of discussion of the state wanting us to take over responsibility for the future dredging projects. And I think they wanted us to sort of assume all that beyond just the upkeep you're talking about. Has that, just wanted to check on that. That has been resolved now there about the responsibility of that kind of project?
Thank you, Mr. Winograd. I think I'll go right to Attorney Verano.
Yes, Madam Mayor, Gina Verano, Deputy Corporation Counsel. That's exactly right, Council Winograd. The state wanted the town to assume the responsibilities for dredging. That has since been resolved, and we have absolutely no obligation to dredge the channel at all.
Thank you, Attorney Verano. Thank you, Mr. Winograd. Do you have another question or comment?
Well, congratulations on that. I know that when that first came up, that was sort of a jaw dropper that they wanted us to do that, and there was a whole lot of research about what had been the agreement 80 years back or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of a crazy process, but congratulations to you and your office for coming up with a good deal for the town.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Mr. Winograd. That was exactly how I was going to close with Attorney Verano. I thank you so much, because this does protect the liability and the extended costs of the town of maintenance. This was beyond our expertise, and it was a bit of a scare that we would have to be required to maintain that, do that dredging work, which was something really out of our expertise and definitely had no manpower to do or equipment. But thank you so much for your work on that. Any further questions, comments? Okay, with that, roll call, Ms. Labrot.
Ms. Blanks.
Councilor Carol Blanks, yes.
Ms. Cantor.
Did you hear me? Yes.
Okay. Mr. Davidoff.
Town Councilman Davidoff, yes.
Ms. Fay.
Town Councilor Mary Fay, yes.
Mr. Gold,
Town Councilor Lee Gold, yes.
Ms. Kerrigan,
Counselor Beth Kerrigan, yes.
Mr. Sweeney,
Liam Sweeney, yes.
Mr. Winograd,
Yes.
and Mr. Williams.
Chris Williams, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Labrot. Now we will go to announcements, and I have a few, and I would like to actually first ask if anybody else has announcements they would like me to share, because then I want to close. Mr. Sweeney.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. This is Liam Sweeney. Just this week, I was able, and I think a lot of people have started to see this, but some students at Conard High School were able to start this new program called WeHa at Your Service.com, and I just think it is a phenomenal idea, and it's just amazing to see our kids be so creative during this time. Basically, what this program is set up is that these kids can take orders for food for elderly or those who are sick, and then provide a delivery service for the elderly and those who are sick. My family's gone through this with. We have an elderly family member who's at one of the nursing homes here in town, and he was struggling to get out, and we were able to provide him, but there are so many people that don't have that available to them, and it's just really amazing to see our schools nurture this kind of community service and thoughtful programming. And so I would just hope everyone can share this and promote this and celebrate these teenagers that are really making the world a better place. So thank you, Mayor Cantor.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. I just will, actually, one of them is a neighbor of mine. One of the young men is a neighbor of mine. And I actually want to say his name's Benjamin Kovici. And he started this with two friends. And now they have, as far as the superintendent shared today, I think they have 10 or 12 students participating in this town-wide. And they have an active list of people that they have already delivered to. And their little flyer was at my door a few days ago. And we can share the phone numbers, but I'll give you Ben's number just because it's 860-709-5989. And they are again inspiring. During vacation week, they decided to get this off the ground, and they are going and have more and more people on board. So thank you so much, Mr. Sweeney, for mentioning that, and we're really proud of these young people. There are also a lot of other volunteers that are willing to help. I was on a call-in last night with Senator Slapp, and there were a number of people that said, well, is there a way to help? And then I received emails and calls today saying, I will drop off something, I will help. So it's really remarkable. We live in an amazing community, and you do see the brightest lights sometimes in these unknown times. So any other announcements before I do a few? Okay. April.
Madam Mayor?
Yes, Mr. Davidoff. Sorry.
Sorry, I didn't know if you saw my hand.
No, I didn't.
Town Councilman David.
Thank you.
I'm short. I would be remiss, and I think our entire community would be remiss, Madam Mayor, if we didn't recognize one of the outstanding volunteers in our community, and that would be you, Madam Mayor. You have definitely shown leadership, shown a spirit that personifies West Hartford in our community. Any chance or any opportunity to take on a volunteer role or to allow others to know about them, you've been at the forefront as our community leader. And you do this from early in the morning to late at night. And I think our community owes you a deep amount of gratitude and appreciation. I have seen and witnessed firsthand your commitment and your involvement in our community. And I think I can speak on behalf of my council colleagues that we're grateful for your leadership, your volunteerism, and your willingness to get our community through this very uncertain time. So thank you for all you do. Thank you for your interaction with town staff and with a lot of other organizations throughout our community. And we're quite appreciative of all your efforts. And I wanted to say that this evening because I think that your efforts should be recognized, and this is the appropriate time to do that. And I know that going forward, there will be more volunteerism and more things that you'll be doing and asking us to assist with, and just be certain to know that we're here to assist you.
Thank you, Mr. Davidoff. I'm a little verklempt. So no, thank you. I appreciate it. I feel like if you're ever gonna run for office, you're ever gonna be mayor, now's the time to leave it all on the floor. So anyway, this is what it's all about. So I'm so honored to serve this amazing community and alongside incredible civil servants like yourselves and our leadership team on town staff. So thank you, and you are a great partner. I appreciate it very much. Any other announcements? Okay, so April is Poetry Month. Who knew, right? And all of this. So it was my first, actually my first resolution a long time ago was to establish a poet laureate for the town of West Hartford. And we were one of the first in the state of Connecticut. And I had received calls from other towns on how did we do this. So our first poet laureate was Maria Sassy. She is just a matriarch of poetry and had so much respect in the poet community. And since then we have Dennis Barone, Ginny Connors, Christine Beck, Jim Finnegan, and Julie Schaffel. And just recently that group of past poet laureates selected a new poet laureate. And his name is Ben Grossberg. And I physically presented a proclamation with him on April 3rd. And I just want to tell you a little bit about our new poet laureate. Benjamin Grossberg is the author of 4 full-length poetry collections. He is the winner of the Tampa Review Prize and Lambda Literary Award. His poems have appeared widely, including in the Pushcart Prize and the Best American Poetry Anthologies. He is a recipient of individual artist grants from the states of Ohio and Connecticut. He serves as assistant poetry editor and book reviewer for the Antioch Review. Ben is director of creative writing at the University of Hartford. I want to thank him for his role of bringing poetry and beauty to our community and sharing it with students and colleagues and seniors, and enriching our community with the work that he will do over the next 3 years is what the term is going to be. So anyway, so I want to thank all of our past poet laureates as well. I also have 2 proclamations that I'm presenting to nobody, but to everybody, because the first one actually is Earth Day, the 50th anniversary of Earth Day. In 1970, and I was alive, but many of you weren't, there was smog and air pollution engulfed many areas of our country. Brown clouds existed over LA. I actually had a brother that moved to LA, and the Cuyahoga River in Ohio caught fire, and the PCBs were in the Hudson, covered in the
I got 15%.
filled in the Hudson River. So the Earth Day started, and I will say at this time during this global pandemic, there is a unique connectedness of all of us to what we to global everything. The impact of what one country does impacts all of us, and I think we're feeling that so profoundly right now at this place and time. So we know that in all aspects we're connected environmentally, health-wise, and economically. And so this proclamation really is, again, the 50th anniversary, talking about this is a global community faces extraordinary challenges that we need to face. And the town of West Hartford celebrates Earth Day by extending it to the whole month of April, what is remaining of the month of April, and encouraging us all to be good stewards of our of our earth and all that impacts us. And the next proclamation is National Volunteer Week. If it's ever, we really thank, as I talked about the students, Lamb had raised the students initiative, but volunteers make this town go. We actually one time or several times have quantified what volunteers bring to our community, and it's millions of dollars. And we want to thank all of us sitting at this table in elected office, our volunteers. And as you will, if you watch tomorrow's night Board of Education meeting, again, all volunteers, the TP&Z that came before us, Kevin Ahern, and the countless hours that they have put in, again, volunteers. But I have seen such generosity and volunteering and people that are so anxious to get in and help, whether it's reaching out to a neighbor or making a call. I received a couple of calls today just checking in on me from different organizations that I'm a part of. This is what it's all about. And so this is National Volunteer Week, and we are also extending this for the end of April as well. And I urge all of the residents to step forward and volunteer and help and reach out and call somebody and do whatever you can to drop off and help. But also I want to thank the amazing volunteers that are with us right now. But I do, Jerida helped write this, and I do want to say that I love the first paragraph. Whereas National Volunteer Week is a time to honor the fundamental idea our volunteers are young, old families, workers, retirees, men and women of all ages and backgrounds, faiths and points of view, recognize that despite those differences, we are bound together with a common destiny by being a resident of this town. That couldn't be better said. So happy Volunteer Week, everybody, and thank you for all that you do. A couple more little things and then we will go. I think you saw today, there was a press release on a program that our Chamber of Commerce and our Economic Development team have been working on for a while to support restaurants. They were trying to pick the right program, and this one really did seem to help. And it's called Eat Local and Win Local. It was launched today, and it's generating support for our local restaurants. To participate, simply order food from any West Hartford restaurant between April 20th and May 31st. Submit your receipt as an entry into the weekly drawing. It's a win-win for everyone. To win, you spend at least $15 at 2 different West Hartford restaurants for a minimum total of $30 between that time period. Take a picture of your receipt and email the picture to eatlocalwinlocal@westhartfordct.gov. And each time you spend a minimum of $30 at 2 different restaurants during this 5-week period, you may submit your receipt for another chance to win. There will be 4 winners selected each week for a total of 20 winners over the course of the campaign. The winners will receive a $25 restaurant gift certificate for a future dine-in visit at a randomly selected West Hartford Chamber member restaurant. Participants are encouraged to show their support of our amazing restaurants. They patronize by taking pictures, writing posts on their social media. Be sure to include the hashtag #EatLocalWinLocalWest Hartford and tag the restaurant you visited. And then I just want to say again on this call I was on with Senator Slapp yesterday, there were 3 to 5 callers, I'd say, that were, well, there were about a handful of callers that really were anxious to volunteer, but 3 callers called in and said, all right, I'm getting my check from the federal government, $1,200 check, and I don't need it as much as someone else does. And where can I donate that money? And I just will say that throughout all the challenges that we've all been facing as our lives have been turned upside down, the generosity and the goodness in people is beyond anything that that I could have imagined. And many of these people I know could have used that $1,200, but they knew that there was someone else in need. There were people that called me about, she's saying, I can't use social services because I know there's people that need it more than I do. So we need to think of all of those people that are giving are so giving, and I want to thank them from the bottom of my heart. And in that note, we have a Ring a Bell at 7 p.m. Initiative throughout the town of West Hartford. This is on Fridays, and it is a ritual to celebrate the good work that all of you are doing, as well as of the amazing essential workers that are working for us every day to give us food and gas and all the things that we need to keep life going. And our first responders that are on the first lines, as we heard to start this meeting, the bravery and what they head into every single day, not knowing what it's going to bring. To our healthcare workers that time after time after time are facing really, really difficult, challenging, long days. So with no end in sight yet. But we know there will be an end in sight. And we also know that we're strong and we're going to come out of this strong and together. But at 7 p.m. on Friday night, step outside, ring a bell for 2 minutes. The sound will be heard all around town in unity, reminding us that we are all in this together. And with that, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn. And if there's no opposition, I will adjourn the meeting. Stay healthy, be well, everybody. Good night.